Clark, thanks for sitting down and talking to me. Excited to just chat with you about some of the things you've been doing. Obviously, I catch your website and some blogs and follow you on Twitter, so it's a lot of fun to hang out with you this week and talk about some really cool things that are happening in our world. So, how's it been going so far? Have you had a good time?
Oh yeah, it's I heard some talks. I've been so busy I haven't heard as many as I'd like because either I'm presenting or I'm running to something else or somebody's grabbed me and tackled me in the hall and hit me up. But catching up with colleagues and sort of seeing where the excitement is, just the number of sessions and attendees that change over the years. So, for instance, I've been out on the mobile stump. I was on the game stump and I was on the mobile stump at the same time, and games finally caught on a little earlier, and then now, and I thought, mobile's ready. We're ready to go. We've got the technology problems are essentially solvable. And we really know the principles of design for this. Let's go. And it's corporate inertia, and yet now the excitement. I don't know if you've seen it, but the number of sessions, the number of attendees, and people, used to avoid them because it was just in the too hard basket. Now they're all over it, so it's exciting.
It is a lot of fun to hear it. And so you've done one session on mobile. Are you doing another one?
I did two. So I did one yesterday with Richard Clark. That was, I think it was Mark said it was a great follow-on to yours because you were talking about simple web pages, and he got a little bit more down to the weeds and talked about HTML and the JavaScript, and actually was showing the JavaScript and using the tools to turn them into apps on the page to go a little bit beyond mobile web. And I just talked about design, and then I talked about design again. I'm a design geek. That's what I do. That's where my passion is. And for Judy Brown's Mobile Learning Jam, David and I talked about instructional design instead of getting lunch. Actually, they brought plates up beforehand.
Kind of a typical problem sometimes here at the e-learning guild. So,
right.
What are you excited about? Sounds like mobile is a big part of.
Actually, it's funny. I was on the stump for mobile and wrote a couple of e-learning guild articles, which if people are interested in, mine's on mobile design, and there's some new thoughts since then always, but it's captured there. And what had happened, games in the mobile, but particularly with some of my clients, to their clients, they would go in and do good e-learning, and they finally go, we need a longer term roadmap. So I started going in and talking to companies about, looking at their situations and trying to figure out what would make sensible steps, and sort of a pattern emerged that I captured a diagram and wrote an article in Michael Allen's latest e-learning annual. It's available on my site as well, that talks about sort of, starting with e-learning, getting improved instructional design, which I really want to emphasize, and then, adding performance support sort of focus, bringing in that social learning component, and then greater integration underneath, start using systems smarter, start building content models that let you do really powerful things underneath, get mobile into it. The goal is to start creating a performance ecosystem, take a responsibility greater than just courses and go, we can't make all the courses that everybody needs because things are getting more complex, they're getting complex faster, and so we just can't meet the needs, so we've got to start empowering people and with performance support and allowing them to support each other through social learning. And so I was doing the learning strategy, and then Jay Cross, who is a colleague, he lives near me, and we're friends and buddies and get in trouble together, has been talking about informal learning. We were looking at meta learning and then informal learning, and so he realized, I talk about social learning, and I don't, here I work by myself, let's bring some people together, and he brought me in, and we've been talking about the social learning component, and that's what we ran the all-day workshop that began, started off the conference for us.
Excellent. I've heard buzz about that. You got to get some good reviews. People have been talking about it.
So cool. That's really nice to hear.
That's great. So, do you think sometimes, we talk a lot about some of those things you mentioned, the social learning and the informal learning and all these things. Do you think sometimes we do lose a little bit of focus on some of those design principles or those good models for learning in the middle of that?
I think absolutely. The other session I did yesterday, besides the mobile one, was one sort of looking out into the future. And, I started off saying, we used to work in apprenticeships. That's the way, our culture evolved was, we work together to make the arrows. Somebody turn the arrow, and a master arrow maker would have an apprentice who'd take on small tasks first and gradually take on. And everybody was aligned in the same direction. Everybody had part of the task. We're all working together to make it happen. And then the Greeks came in and said, okay, well, we're going to have the master, and he's going to query the individual student and have this relationship. And then the Germans introduced 1800s the classroom, where everybody's an independent node, and we just dump knowledge on them, and whoever performs manages to learn in that way as the ones who succeed. And it's like, and now that the technology's changed from those classrooms to computer classrooms, we still have one instructor dumping individual knowledge on a bunch of people, and it's crazy. It has nothing to do with how people really learn. So you look, so what I did is I say, let's go back and look at kids who learn the way naturally we learn until we put them in school and extinguish their level of learning. The notion is that they commit and they go back at it again, and they converse and they copy other people, and there's all sorts of phenomena. And most of our learning design reflects none of this. And the really cool thing is now, Arthur C. Clarke once said, any truly advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. We have magic. We really do. I mean, the limits are no longer the technology. And, granted, our limits may be our pocketbook once in a while, too, or our commitment or vision, but it's really our vision, our imagination, because, I've never had a big budget. You're welcome to change that. But I've been able to do amazing things by knowing what to do and finding, very pragmatic, running on the smell of an oily rag type of solutions. And so we can do anything. So what should we be doing? We need to step back and say, how do we make our learning more natural? How do we get people working together in alignment? How do we empower them? And the barriers are really culture eats strategy for breakfast. Because if you don't, that social learning, you put in a social learning solution, you put them in some companies and it's dead. Nothing happens. Why? Because it's not safe to share. You put it in and they'll shoot you down, or they'll fire you because they believe they got your knowledge out of it. And you got to change that culture. And then even if you fix that problem, you still have the organizational issues. Because to do it right, you really got to break down the barriers across the organization and start getting people talking to one another and talking, at all levels, not, a hierarchy structure. And those are the barriers to making that work. So I think, our instructional design, one of the first book about games was really about engagement. Keller is the only instructional design theorist who talks at all about motivation, making it relevant to the person, addressing their level of anxiety and confidence, making sure they believe that the experience was worthwhile for them, maintaining their attention through it. And yet, if you look at, that was the premise of the first book, you look at what makes good educational practice, you look at what makes an engaging experience, and there's recurrent items. It turns out there's perfect alignment. So learning really should be hard, fun, but most of our learning is deadly boring and essentially has no impact on the workplace because it's too far separated. It's knowledge dump instead of application. So
Absolutely, I agree.
So you just push my button. Watch me speak.
Exactly. So we work with the frontline sales representatives who are customer facing, and our customer care folks who again are customer facing, just in a slight different capacity. Oftentimes they get a tremendous amount of information and they're required to take this course and they're required to take that. So I think like what you're saying about helping them understand or get that excitement to, hey, this is important to me and the success I have. So what do you think of some ways that can be done? How does that work?
The first thing is one of my tricks. First of all, you got to make it a meaningful skill. So it starts with a very objective. What behaviors do we need to change to make the company more successful? How do we make them greet people and feel better in a way and help them steer them, solution selling sense to the right phone, not just the most expensive phone. I mean, really, you want long-term customers. You really want that relationship. I believe that stuff. So you got the right objective, and then you got to make sure you focus on the skills that change and really make an effective learning. But then you got to, and I often argue about you can't trust subject matter experts because they no longer know how they do what they do, because the whole point of being experts is you've compiled that and you don't have access to it anymore. So you've got to tease it apart. And one of the strategies they use is they resort to knowledge dump. Oh, well, I learned all this stuff, so that must be what you need to learn to do this, because I learned all that. And it's just dead wrong. Most of that's irrelevant, and you want to focus on the behavior change. So subject matter experts can be difficult to work with because they don't know what you need,
Right.
and they don't even, and they believe what you need is not what that you really need, so you have to fight with them, and they can focus on knowledge them. But there's a way in which they're your greatest friend, and this is the circuitous answer to your question, is because they're passionate about this. They love it. This is what they do, and if you can tap into that and find out what makes that a good person, what makes them love that, and bake that into your learning, you have a real good opportunity to help your learners, to tap into that as well and use that as leverage to get it in. You got to make it meaningful to them. But, in one sense, you can say, yes, this is going to lead to higher commissions, your compensation for your work. But if you can really tap into what makes it fun, that's where you get a big win. And I like to illustrate this with a story. A colleague at my university found out I did games for learning and said, oh, well, we're doing one. Would you like to help? I said, sure. What's it about? Computer auditing. My eyes finished rolling back in my head. I said, I'd rather have my teeth pulled without anesthesia. Yeah, that's what I thought too. But then I talked to them, and they said, it's like playing detective. There's an error, and you got to go work your way back. And most of the time, it's a mistake. They just made a mistake. But sometimes it's deliberate. Right there, you've got a story,
Yeah.
And that's in fact what they baked in. And that's the point, is you find what makes it fun for them and you bake that in. And, it also serves as a filter. If people don't find that fun, they're not the right person doing the task.
Yeah.
You may not have as much choice as you like to get rid of people in the stores, but at least you really might even have a good predictor of who's really going to be worth investing in to get the top performance out of.
Absolutely. So what are you working on right now? What do you think going on?
With one organization, I'm actually going in, and they have some pockets of social learning going on. So, one group literally in there realized they could no longer keep up with the software training. The software was getting more complex. They were using more and more different pieces of software for very specialized tasks, and they just weren't able to continue to produce formal training on. So one group started giving people Camtasia and empowering them to create their own training, and another guy started putting the information in a wiki. And so, and then they're devolving responsibility out to the people to keep it up to date and help one another start preparing the information. So instead of formal courses, they're just getting the information out. But and that's one of the things I think training departments do wrong, and is they focus on the formal instruction. They use that everywhere, but practitioners don't really need all the wrapping, the motivation stuff. They know what they're doing. They know what they need to know, and you could just have an expert talk to them. And everybody says, "Oh, you're boring." An expert lecturing to us PowerPoint slide detailed information is horrible. No, it's the right thing for those practitioners, and then experts need it. So you need to recognize the transition of people, and so they are finding that they can do much less formal and get information out, and yet it's extraordinarily valuable when people are demanding more of their services. So they've got these pockets of things, but now they want to have an organizational strategy, and actually the enterprise IT group is coming up with an approach that they're recommending, and they recognize, and the learning group is now recognizing this, and the only problem is, of course, they're on a collision course because they're coming at it from two different ways and they have sort of two different fundamental assumptions. But my job is to just go in and look what they're doing, put it together, report the findings, and then when they agree, one of the things you got to do when you're doing this is, you look at what you think you see, you report it back to them. They may want to refine it, say, oh, you didn't find out enough about this, you really didn't understand this. But once you agree the findings, then I'm going to go forward and give them some recommendations and forward. Other firms, I'm looking at their learning design, going to talk to their clients, trying to improve the solutions that they deliver, and all sorts of advisory roles with people who just want to get some advice about how to make it better.
So I appreciate the fact that you share what you learned with us. That's really a great thing through your writing. What kind of projects you got going on there? What are you writing about these days?
Oh well, yes. And I guess it's because I was an academic. I guess if you're passionate about education, you can't share it. One of my employees when I had a real job, once told me, working with you is like going to graduate school. And I took that as a compliment. That was intended. But so, in addition to writing papers with the Internet Time Alliance, that's Jay and colleagues, Harold Yarkey, Jane Hart, Charles Jennings, and John Husband are some of the other people involved in that all complementary skills. So that's a real learning experience for me. But the learning we're sharing through workshops and things. But obviously I think the thing you're kindly referring to is the fact that I've got a mobile learning book under contract with Pfeiffer, and so that's occupying a fair bit of my bandwidth to get done. Is to I want to interview a bunch of people. David Metcalf put out an mLearning book, but unfortunately it was his editors let him down and they didn't edit the book, and it's really not going to meet the needs. And he nor Judy Brown, who are the other people I think of when I think of mobile from the get-go, are not writing it. So I guess I was the third person to go down those. But Gary Woodward from Brandon Hall is actually writing one too, but his is much more about the business case, and I have to have a focus in mind specifically about how do you design it. I have a mantra. If you get the design right, there are lots of ways to implement it. If you don't get the design right, it doesn't matter how you implement it. So it's very much focusing on how do we design it, and how do design groups, instructional groups in organizations. How do they make mobile part of their repertoire of solutions when they think about a problem? How do they naturally say, oh, that's an opportunity for mobile? That's the type of thinking I'm trying to accomplish. So. And so I'm going to interview lots of people. So I see you're getting back at me for this, aren't you? Put some of the thinking that was in the thing. I'm going to have to, it's not about the technology. I got to talk about the technology. It's not about show some examples, talk about some principles, talk about incorporating it, and cover some of the implementation. The organizational change issues involved in it and opportunities.
But going back to we kind of originally talked about mobile. I think it is that kind of people tend to focus on the technology aspect and possibly the limitations or what we can do and what we can't do in mobile learning or in e-learning as well, rather than those basic design principles, which I think change depending on the type of learning you're delivering, what kind of training you're doing. So, kind of honing that in for the particular medium, and mobile has some very specific ways I think that maybe things need to be done.
Well, exactly. I mean, you listen to the complaints. Those screens are too small. There's too many different platforms, and you can't design, which is a bit of a legitimate problem. But the screens are too small. They are small, but they're not too small. It's too hard to develop for. No, it can be hard to develop, but it's not too hard. You can get real value propositions out of it, and people are doing. Oh, and something you mentioned remind me. And the problem with people who design courses is they want to put a course on a phone, and that's just not the right idea.
Take what we have and dump it on the phone.
Right,
yeah.
But if you take that broader perspective of learning from novice to practitioner to expert and start thinking about how do I support them in the mobile workforce, and even the people who are just, one of the main factors is convenience. Can I listen to this podcast, or I can access this little chunk while I'm doing, sort of stuck somewhere else in the doctor's office, on a plane, whatever. But it's usually not full courses. It's augmenting learning. That's why I like to talk about our brains. Really good pattern matchers. Really bad at remembering rote information. You know what? Those devices, horrible pattern matchers. Really good at remembering rote information. Together, we're a much more powerful problem solver. So it's really about performance support. It's augmenting our brains with things that our brains don't do well. And together, from the problem's point of view, we're much more powerful together than we are with either one alone. And so it's that sort of thinking that gets away from courses. And we can augment learning, extend learning by reactivating. We can do little bits and pieces around it. But the augment for performance, really, mLearning is in performance support. And what can we do? Convenience is one thing, but context-specific solutions. I'm here. I've got to fix that device. Oh, it knows where I am through my GPS, and it knows what devices we have installed here because we have a manifest. Oh, and it's just pulled up the troubleshooting device for that. Hey, that's cool. I mean, it's that sort of context-specific, useful information, and it might be just a quick checklist, but the screen's not too small to do that. Yeah. And of course, now we're getting these wonderful things. But if you don't have it, if you only have a phone with SMS or audio, what could you do? Well, you could have somebody talking you through the diagnosis. Look for this, check this. I'm agreeing with you furiously. I mean, I think you have it exactly right. Use the me mode and meet the need in a creative set of ways.
Excellent. So, what do you think the value of coming to these type of events is? Not only for you, but for the instructional designers, the people that, all the people that come here to I don't know why everybody comes. I think we all come for different reasons, looking for different things. What do you take on that? What do you?
A couple things. It's funny. The reason I'm cracking up is because the guild interviewed a number of people upstairs, and they were asking, "Why? What do you think about the guild events? You know, why are they good? You know, are they good? And what? You know, why do you like them?" But it's a funny irony. People who I think should know better go, you know, we shouldn't lecture in our classrooms. You know, when we're trying to train people, telling ain't training. Why would we go to conferences and listen to somebody talk to us? And there's a very good reason why cognitively that's true, is because we're deeply engaged in activity. And when we go hear somebody else talk about their experience with that activity and some principles, it's a reflection moment. And learning is really action or reflection. Instruction is designed action and guided reflection. And the interesting thing, one of the opportunities with mobile is you have action in the world. You can wrap, you know, instead of having to go away to an event and have a simulated practice, you can have a real practice in the world. You can wrap the learning around it. That's one of the really neat things we can do with mobile that I'm really keen on. But going back to conferences, there's several things. So here you get a immersive experience of people wrestling with similar problems and sharing their thinking, and it serves as a reflection opportunity for you. You can pick up tips. It just gives you a chance to think back on what you're doing, because organizationally, one of the things the research says, if you give people time for reflection out of the same work week, so you shrink the actual time they're working and give them some time for reflection, they actually perform more with the reduced performance time than if you have them performing that whole time. It's just crazy, and yet we don't have time for reflection. Oh, so you don't have time to improve, okay. But, so that's what conferences are. And, you know, granted it's a mental break as well from the work. You're out of the context, so you can focus on the reflective stuff and decompress from the work and share with like-minded and you know, piss and moan and get sympathy where nobody else will give you sympathy back in the office. Just, you know, man up and do it. You know?
I'm not guilty of that.
I didn't mean you. I just mean in general, right?
Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, no, just in general. Or you can, you know, talk about it, and you can look at the bigger trends. You can find, you know, there's such a diversity. I think the Guild does a good job of this, actually, of getting a diversity that mimics what's happening in the place. They, more so than any organization, actually have their own people who understand what's happening instead of having to pull together a panel and then do some unholy balance and stuff. They already know what's of interest and is happening. So there's a good chance to explore, you know, so there's a wide spectrum, far more than you can really sample. But because, you know, in addition to doing things that are personally, you know, relevant to your work, you can explore the directions you think are coming in your place, and it is designed to be specifically informative, and they work hard to make good speakers who can communicate in reasonable ways. So I think those are the reasons having a chance to get away to a conference is good. And the interesting thing, you know, so I'm going to be briefly part next week. There's the Corporate Learn Trends Conference. You know about that? Yeah, so 3 days online presentations for free, horribly expensive, but I don't think that's quite as good. It's much more convenient. So, you know, people who've already blown their budgets, I remember seeing a number of tweets from people going, next year I'm going to have to plan better because I'm not at DevLearn and it sounds like I should be. But they can go to Corporate Learn Trends. It's not going to be quite as immersive, and so it's such a good reflective opportunity because they may get interrupted by phone calls or the boss coming on the hammering on the door. It's better than nothing, but I really think there's a reason to come together physically as part of the, you know, the most effective learning process in this instance.
I feel energized when I leave, you know, even though I'm exhausted, energized, you know.
Physically exhausted, mentally energized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time. It's been fantastic talking to you, and looking forward to hanging out with you more at the conference.
All right, thanks.